Are you ready to master the waves of medical device product development? Well, wax up your surfboard because you are listening to Inspired by Imua. And here is your medical device product development expert, that Hawaiian-hearted hostess who will help you hang 10, Meghan Alonso.
And aloha! You're listening to Inspired by Imua, where we help you master the waves of medical product development. Each week, we interview guests that educate, guide, and inspire to give you and your product the skills you need to hang 10. If this is your first time listening, Imua is spelled I-M-U-A, and it's a Hawaiian word. It means to advance forward with passion despite rough waves. There are plenty of those in medical product development, so keep listening because we've got you covered. So I wanted to remind you today, we're actually going to dig into an overview of a recent conference that I was at. But speaking of conferences, we have one coming up on January 23rd that I will be speaking at, and that's MedTech Monday. If you go to medtechmonday.com, you can register there and you get $100 off if you use the code Monday 100. So that conference, if you're traveling to Southern California, it's literally right across the street from Orange County Airport. So you don't need a cab or Uber. Just walk on over, come hang out for the day, have a good time, learn about MedTech, and I will see you there. So we are going to get into a little overview of DeviceTalks West that I was at recently. Brian Johnson always does a great job with this conference, and I really enjoy it every year. And we covered a few different topics, everything from what is healthcare going to look like in the next 25 years? What are some changes, looking back on the year 2016, and just kind of looking at also where was healthcare 50 years ago, and have we made the advancements that we thought we would, or advancements in just technology in general. And if you've never been to one of these DeviceTalks events, there's one on the West Coast in December, and then Minneapolis in the summertime, and then in Boston in September. So he made a joke that he just plans it in warm places each conference. So yeah, escape to Southern California in the wintertime, very well planned out. So the day starts with some keynotes, some panel discussions, then we get into some interactive hands-on workshops. Then later on, cocktail reception, then we close at dinner. He does an intimate interview with a MedTech CEO, and the stage is set where they're just really comfortable. It's kickback, and you're just getting information from a CEO that you never would in any other environment. Brian is excellent at interviewing. He went to school for journalism, so he knows what he's doing. But he's able to really capture that human side of the CEO and just dig out those stories that not many other people probably would. So I'm going to get into an overview of what I learned, and I asked some questions specifically for people that are just starting out. If you're a startup and you're wondering, what the heck did I get myself into? Or if you're in product development and you're farther along down the line, and what is really important to you. And so I hope I kind of capture that. So the first part of the conference, we had a panel on what's coming down the line in healthcare. And so these were a panel of medical device leaders. We had from Intensive Insulin Management Group of Medtronic. We had InTouch Healthcare, Halt Medical, which is women's health startup company, and HeartFlow. And we talked about these newer technologies coming out and where trends are headed. So in the future, I feel like Conan O'Brien, if you remember, in the year 2000, that was on the Late Show. And I think they even did it after the year 2000, which was funny. But it was just what they think is going to happen in this new millennium. So what we think is coming in our millennium is just increased patient engagement, and the healthcare system is undergoing a major shift. So If you hear jingle bells in the background, you are not mistaken. That's my dog. That's Abby, and I put this jingle bell collar on her, and she just wandered into the room. So that's what that is. So anyway, increased patient engagement. There's going to be more patient-driven healthcare, and we've already been seeing that. Patients are demanding their data. There's already these self-tracking devices out there, and just with how the internet and information has expanded, people are on top of their healthcare like never before. And it's not the type of care where patients go in and they ultimately bow down to the doctor and think, oh, yeah, they know everything. Because a lot of times they're just getting one view of what's going on with you. So being able to own that information and really own it so you can share it with all of your other doctors, and just being able to synthesize that information in a new way. And right now that's being driven by the patient, but later on maybe we will get really sophisticated with the electronic health records and have that streamlined to be able to go from one hospital system to another, which where it's currently not. And also we're going to get and this is predictions, but prediction of getting away from selling devices, but moving more towards selling services and management of healthcare. And that's not to mean that there's not going to be any more medical devices. There's certainly going to be medical devices, but it's not just a device that does something. It's more with a service behind it, or management of care, improved patient outcomes, looking and synthesizing data and helping as a tool. Then we're going to understand and we're going to leverage that data. So how can we know what's coming? Well, let's look at the past, let's analyze these trends and look at where we think this patient is going in the future. So augmented reality, using that. So I didn't quite know what this was, but it's similar to virtual reality. So imagine a surgeon and they need to be able to practice surgery. So they have this system. Maybe they put on an Oculus Rift type of thing where it's these virtual reality goggles and they're in a simulated surgical environment. And then machine learning too. I actually was on Facebook the other day and just saw something that Mark Zuckerberg had posted, and Jarvis was its name. And Jarvis is an artificial intelligence machine learning app, I think, that he had on his phone. And it was supposed to learn his patterns and knows what he wants, be able to turn on and off the lights type thing. But just how can we leverage that for patients? If we have this artificial intelligence with patients, if we're able to know when their blood sugar is typically dropping, is it going to drop at that same time 5 months from now, or crazy stuff like that. Being able to sort data, so being able to look at that on more of a statistical and analytical level and building models, so we don't have to have all these crazy clinical trials. We can leverage that data and use these models instead of more patient heavy trials. And then at this point in the conference, I'm looking over my notes. I asked specifically, I said, so how can startups leverage what's coming? And essentially, my answers that I got from the panel were to fail fast. So really, really spend a lot of time up front. And I always preach this, that you need to validate your idea and you need to do market research and pretty quickly determine if this idea is viable and that if it's fundable even. And if it's not, don't spend any more money on it, drop it, and move on to the next thing. So fail fast, and then building a great team. So gone are the days of I can do this myself and it will only be me and I will get this all the way across the goalpost onto the market. That's just not how things work anymore. So being able to build a solid team around you internally and externally with a board of advisors and being able to leverage connections as far as key development partners, everything from engineering to regulatory to clinical trials, and having those experts available to you. You don't necessarily have to have everyone internally. You can be lean and mean and hire people on the outside. And hey, guess what? I'm a resource for that. So if you need help with that, let me know. You are always are welcome to schedule an appointment with me just by going on my website. So don't ever forget that. I'm open to talking with you anytime you need to talk. As always, startups need to be smart with their cash and not blow it in the beginning. You need to strategically look at what you spend your money on and spend it accordingly. Make sure it's going to be very valuable to you. And then when you do have institutional funding or any type of funding, it's usually milestone driven. So being able to execute on those milestones and spend the money accordingly so that you're able to get to those milestones, first of all. So looking at that and just stay focused. Someone brought up a really good point, which I wrote down. And this was that, as venture fund is shifting, and speaking of venture funding, I am wanting to do a podcast on how the funding ecosystem has been shifting as well. So I'm headed to the JP Morgan Healthcare Conference in January. Let's see, I'll be in San Francisco the 8th through the 11th. And if you're going to be there, let me know. I'd love to meet up with you. And I've got lots and lots of free parties that I'm registered for. So hopefully I'll see you at some of those. But anyway, I want to do a podcast on how this whole venture capital funding is shifting and how you can get funding today versus what it was like 10 years ago. So someone brought up that instead of venture funding as an alternative or in addition to, there's a lot of patient advocacy groups that are always willing to fund research. One of the major ones that I know has pumped a lot of money into a few companies that I know, and this has been recent, is a Juvenile Diabetes Research Association. And their mission is to forward research about diabetes. So it only makes sense for them to align themselves with startup companies that are doing just that. And that's a great resource because you have a captive audience there of just really passionate people and would love to see your product coming to market. So if you get patient advocacy groups on your side, that's definitely like the Good Housekeeping seal of approval. If you have all these organizations backing you, and it just gives you so much credibility. Okay, later on, we were talking about path to market, and someone made a comment that was really good. I think that you shouldn't rush into a 510K. There's a lot of companies out there, or a lot of people that will say, "Oh yeah, I can get you a 510K very, very quickly," but you don't want to do that. Sometimes you want to make sure you have excellent data. You want to understand the value system and the stakeholders, and really make sure of what you're going after is going to make sense, rather than just, hey, this is easy, I'm going to move forward with it. Okay, so in the year 2025, we kind of thought about what's going to happen, and interoperability has been a major challenge. Even if I remember going to a talk 4 years ago about this, and how, we have all these things that are cloud-based and they're all doing these amazing things, but then you have, maybe you have Philips, maybe you have Medtronic, maybe you have CareFusion, and they don't all talk to each other. And that's intentional on some cases, so that, because it's a strategic play. If you are a big company, you want to sell your products, not necessarily anyone else's. So you can have, it's kind of like the iPhone, I guess. You have the iPhone. Well, there is no headphone jack. Guess what? You have to buy our headphones for that. And I don't actually know if that's the case, because I haven't ventured into much to that. I like my real headphones. So, but you can see, there's only things that are compatible with your brand rather than breaking down those barriers and being able to connect several different brand of things to the internet, which brings me to the Internet of Things and being able to make things all talk to each other. And so that I think is awesome. There's some good stuff with that. But at the same time, we as medical device startups and companies that are pushing for that need to be really careful on a security stance with that. So being able to make sure that it's not hacked and that bad things don't happen to those patient data sets and the patients. If someone hacks into a network of devices, say it's a respirator for a hospital and someone's hooked up to that, that could be deadly. So we just want to be careful with that. Electronic medical records, again, a great thing, but it's so fragmented. You have several different companies offering electronic medical records, and then it's just this big chore of, okay, one hospital system can't talk to another. I can't do this. I can't get those records because of that. So if they all have open APIs where they can share data with one another, that I think that will eventually happen. Then we heard an interesting discussion from Nick Terrafranca of Neuro Recovery Technologies. And I've known Nick, I guess, for about 3.5, 4 years maybe. And Nick's been working on his startup. It's a neuromodulation system. And he has an interesting story. I'd love to bring him on the podcast and just share some of his journey. It hasn't been easy for him to raise funding. And I feel like his story is very relatable. A lot of people can say, hey, yeah, I've experienced that. And a lot of you listening, unfortunately, will probably face some of those problems too. So, he had a big market that he was going after. There's lots of opportunity in the marketplace, but being able to really justify that his product is meaningful in the healthcare system. And he was going for more of the value-based approach of, hey, this is going to reduce the overall cost of healthcare. So yes, my device is expensive, but this is what it's going to do in the long run. And our healthcare system is shifting to that, but a lot of people are still slow to adopt that. So it's just showing them that data, being able to look at that, and maybe you do a pilot study with one hospital or one clinic, and you compare it to this is what they were doing before, and then since we've added my device into the chain of healthcare, this is what it looks like afterwards, and being able to really show that data, show the algorithms, and being able to just prove it better. So next I'll cover a workshop that I went to, and this was covering mergers and acquisitions, IP and product liability trends impacting medtech. And I honestly was really, really impressed. I thought, okay, this is going to be okay, but it was more than okay. It was pretty awesome. So some of the things covered in that workshop, and I didn't take as many notes at first, but we looked at the M&A realm of what's happening. And we've seen these mega deals like Alere and Abbott, and there's a major spike in vitro diagnostics. And this data where you have these mega deals and these huge companies merging together, it's skewing the average deal size. So it's a little bit misleading when you see the figures for the average deal size. And I didn't write that down actually, but it's kind of inflating it. So it's kind of like you have these little tract homes, and then down the street you have these huge mansions. And so in that particular zip code, yeah, maybe the average selling price of a home is going to be $1 million, but people aren't seeing the reality of these smaller houses down the hill. So just be aware of that. You need to take that with a grain of salt when you're looking at mergers and acquisitions, and just making sure you're seeing the data right. And as far as the patent systems, the European patent system is streamlining, which is great news. So they're making it so that there's one application for 31 countries. But the downside of that is if you're sued, it's in each country. It's not necessarily like, hey, I'm being sued in Germany. I'm being sued in the whole European Union. And that's problematic because of the court system. So they're also trying to move to a unitary system with that. So there's just one court. You don't need to be in court in several different companies. This was going to happen in early 2017, but then Brexit happened. So it's kind of to be determined. So we'll see. Overall advice for intellectual property was file early and file often, but you want to be sure and file something that is patentable, or I might be phrasing that wrong. You don't just want to jump the gun and patent something. It has to be worth patenting, because later on down the line, when you're filing for a change, then that might be cumbersome. You want to do it at the right time. You can't just do it right away. You want to monitor your competitors and what they're doing as far as their patent activity. And you can utilize US PTO incentives to streamline the process. So you can look into track 1 examination and first action interview requests. And then this stuff is just kind of later on, although you do need to be thinking about it as you're building a company. So you need to remain vigilant of what's happening in the law out there as far as Supreme Court decisions continue to shape our patent system. And it's a significant part of investment. If there's any flaws in your IP and you're having people invest, that can be a deal breaker right away if you don't have your IP wrapped up. So we talked about how companies can get themselves in trouble later when you're faced with product liability lawsuits. And one of the attorneys just had some really interesting stories about, there would be an older lady on the stand that had a hip replacement, and they're digging out all these company emails, and there's expletives in the emails, and there's a paper trail or an email trail essentially of how the company knew things were wrong, and they're disclosing this over email and talking about it, and then things didn't get done. So that's a huge no-no, obviously. So don't do that. And one of the takeaways from that panel was to dance like no one's watching, and then email like it'll be in a deposition. So just always be careful with email. Make sure that it's something that you would want anyone to see. So, and it could be, something confidential, but just always use language like others are going to see it. And that way you're never embarrassed, or that makes you look really bad in front of a jury, obviously. So one thing that goes into these product lawsuits is when you're training your sales staff, even, how do you put together your training courses? What's your sales staff seeing in presentations? What do you create? How pushy are they when they're training or when they're talking with physicians? You need to be aware of that. So the way you report claims and adverse events, and then also avoiding quotes, acknowledging anything you agreed about. So someone comes back to you later and said, hey, I got an infection from your device, or I got hurt from your device. That always should go through a lawyer. You shouldn't ever agree to anything or just settle, because again, that can come back to bite you. We've all seen these lawsuits of where people have been hurt in the past, and then everybody jumps on that bandwagon, and that leaves you to greater liability right there. And speaking of that, so we talked about the surgical mesh lawsuits. Those have been going on like crazy. So guess what? If you have a new surgical mesh product or something really similar that you're applying for a 510K for, guess what the FDA is going to think about that? They're probably not going to be keen to go ahead and give you clearance on your 510K. So sometimes if you can go through a pre-market approval or PMA path, it minimizes the risk because the product liability has already been vetted. And if you've been down this path, I know you're thinking, yeah, but a PMA is way more expensive than a 510K. So it just, again, it comes down to funding too. Are you prepared for that? And can you handle that? And is that the right strategy for you to move forward with? So I think that covers, actually, no, it doesn't cover. I'm skipping over our evening keynote. So I just sat back and enjoyed that. Sorry, guys. I didn't take any notes with that one. And I was eating dinner too, really enjoying my delicious chicken. So Brian sat down with Scott Hennekins, the CEO of Verb Surgical, VERB, that is, and what we can expect from this spin out. So this is really exciting. It's a collaboration between Johnson & Johnson and Google. So this guy is in charge of that. He's kind of given free reign, although it is kind of a different environment. The company's housed out of Google, and they're learning medtech and they're learning what to do. So their technology, they're used to things moving at lightning speed. But with medtech, as we know, there's a lot of regulatory oversight that needs to go into that. So everybody's super pumped, and they're doing a lot of cool stuff with Verb. So check out them. You'll see amazing stuff coming from them. So I hope you enjoyed this little wrap up of the conference, and I will do a better job of taking notes next time so I can share with you. But, it would be better if you just come to the conference and hang out. So you can do that. Again, January 23rd, MedTech Monday. Go sign up at medtechmonday.com. You can get $100 off with the code Monday100, and I'll be speaking. So you'll get to hear my voice and see my face in person at the same time. And hopefully that doesn't scare you away. All right. Well, we are getting close. When this episode airs, it'll be December 27th. Yeah. So we will have passed Christmas, but Happy New Year. And I will talk to you next year. And until then, Imua.
Mahalo for joining us. If you're new to riding the waves of medical device product development, or if you've been in development for a while already, Inspired by Imua is here to surf with you. Want to be a master of the waves? Text HANG10, that's HANGTEN, to 44222. We'll send you the most common wipeouts companies make in product development so you can avoid them and reach master wave status. Again, that's HANG10 to 44222. We publish a new episode every Tuesday, so catch us at inspiredbyimua.com. Imua!